He was still alive. 3 months after hiring a world-class assassin to kill him, Julian was not only breathing but had also gained 10 pounds. He slammed the final payment onto the gleaming granite countertop, his voice a low tremor of fury. He demanded to know when Ethan would finally act. Ethan, wearing a ridiculously cheerful apron adorned with a cartoon lobster, was stirring a pot of beef stew. He didn't turn. He simply stated that Julian needed to be patient to build his strength up. It would make for a better coroner's report. The aroma from the pot was maddening, a rich, savory scent of slow-simmered beef and root vegetables. Despite his rage, Julian felt a pang of hunger. He had already consumed 2 bowls earlier. The thought shamed him. A man who desperately sought oblivion had no business indulging in earthly pleasures. His name was Julian Vance, the youngest son of the Vance dynasty and its most spectacular failure. A diagnosis of severe depression and anorexia had become his entire identity. For him, living was like drowning in slow motion, each breath a painful, searing intake of water. 3 months prior, through the shadowed corners of the internet, he had contacted a figure known only as X, a top-tier contractor rumored to operate along the volatile borders of Eastern Europe and the Middle East. The man was a ghost, a professional with a portfolio of clean, untraceable accidents. This was crucial. Julian wanted an end, not a scandal. He had paid a deposit of $500,000 for Ethan to orchestrate the conclusion to his wretched life. And Ethan had come. His name was Ethan Cole. He was tall and lean, with a face that hinted at a mixed heritage, defined by deep-set eyes and sharp cheekbones. His hands were long and elegant, devoid of any rings or tattoos. The way he looked at Julian during their first meeting was unnerving, like an appraiser examining a piece of damaged art. He had stood on the porch of Julian's sprawling, neglected Hamptons mansion and frowned. Julian assumed he was hesitating at the complexity of the task. Instead, Ethan had pulled on a pair of white gloves and pointed to the layer of dust on the foyer floor, remarking that the environment was substandard. A slip and fall in such a filthy place would immediately raise suspicion of foul play. Julian had to concede the point. The house hadn't seen a cleaning service since his diagnosis. So Ethan moved in, posing as a distant cousin. The first week was an ordeal. The man possessed a level of compulsive cleanliness that seemed utterly at odds with his profession. The vast, empty mansion had once been Julian's tomb, every door closed except for his own bedroom. Ethan threw open every window and door, declaring a need to air out the stagnant energy. He claimed that he didn't want to inhale mold spores while staging the scene. Dressed in gray coveralls he'd produced from nowhere, he moved through the house like a hazardous materials specialist. Julian, slumped in his wheelchair, not because he couldn't walk, but because he couldn't be bothered, watched him with cold detachment. He asked if Ethan didn't have better things to do. Without looking up from polishing the massive crystal chandelier, Ethan replied that this was his work. He mused aloud that if the fixture were to fall, it would make for a splendid accident, but the thick layer of dust would ruin the aesthetic, causing an unseemly death by asphyxiation. Julian was left speechless. On the first day, Ethan purged the house of all trash. On the second, he polished the hardwood floors until they reflected the gray sky. On the third, he filled the cavernous, empty refrigerator with fresh groceries. Julian suspected it was some kind of ritual, a modern version of a condemned man's last meal. Mealtimes were the worst. His anorexia made the very sight of food a physical trial. Ethan presented him with a simple bowl of broth, light and clear. Julian turned his head away, refusing. Ethan's voice, when he told him to drink, was devoid of warmth, carrying the chilling weight of a man accustomed to violence. Julian challenged him, asking what he would do. Kill him? That was, after all, what he was being paid for. Ethan set the bowl down with a sharp click against the marble table. He moved to stand over Julian, his shadow falling across him. Then his hand shot out, seizing Julian's jaw. The grip was immensely powerful, the calluses on his fingers abrasive against Julian's skin. He leaned in close, his voice a low growl, informing Julian of a misunderstanding. Julian, his life, and even his stomach now belonged to Ethan. He gave Julian a choice: cooperate or be restrained and fed through a tube. The look in his eyes, the flat, cold eyes of a man who had taken lives, held no room for bluff. Julian capitulated. He shakily lifted the bowl and forced himself to swallow a spoonful. His stomach churned, but he held it down. Ethan released him, his expression smoothing back into a neutral mask. He even had the audacity to straighten Julian's collar, patting his head as if he were a dog and telling him he was being good. As a reward for finishing, he said he could watch television. Julian wanted to scream, but under that unwavering gaze, he finished the entire bowl, then immediately fled to the bathroom and retched violently. Ethan appeared in the doorway, offering a towel. He said with unnerving calm that it didn't matter. They would simply try again. Some of it would be absorbed. From that day, Julian knew he had met his match. And so it had gone for 3 months. Now, Julian pushed his empty stew bowl away and stared at Ethan's back. The hands that were so adept at cleaning, cooking, and, presumably, killing, were now gently washing a soup bowl printed with a ridiculous cartoon duck. He called his name. Ethan, without turning, said he didn't take new requests until the dishes were done. Julian got to his feet, his voice rising as he accused Ethan of fraud. He had taken the deposit and done nothing but play house. Ethan turned off the water, dried his hands, and faced him. He was taller than Julian by half a head, and he smelled faintly of dish soap and the lingering scent of tobacco. He asked if Julian had ever seen photographs from an actual accidental death. Julian admitted he had not. Ethan explained, in a calm, lecture-like tone, that the bodies of the frail and malnourished were often grotesque in death. He took a step closer, his fingers lightly brushing the side of Julian's neck, directly over the carotid artery. For a moment, Julian closed his eyes, almost hoping. Ethan's fingers slid down to his shoulder, squeezing gently. He described how, in Julian's current state, a fall down the stairs would shatter his bones like dry twigs, how his organs would rupture. It wouldn't be an accident, he whispered near Julian's ear, his breath warm. It would be a pile of lanro rotten meat. My work, he stated, pulling back, must be perfect. He tapped Julian's cheek as if testing a melon for ripeness. His body wasn't ready. His skin lacked luster, his muscle mass was too low. He ordered Julian to take a nap. They were having barbecue ribs for dinner. That night, a thunderstorm raged. Julian had feared them since childhood, since his stepmother had locked him in the damp, dark cellar. The fear was primal, etched into his bones. He lay in bed, trembling, when the door opened. It was Ethan holding a glass of warm milk. He didn't ask. He simply observed Julian's fear. Julian tried to hide it, clenching the sheets. With a soft sigh, Ethan placed the milk on the nightstand, then did something astonishing. He lifted the duvet and got into the bed. Julian recoiled, asking what he was doing. Ethan simply told him to sleep, explaining that as the custodian of Julian's life, he had a duty to ensure the asset wasn't damaged by something as mundane as a heart attack from fear. He pulled Julian, blankets and all, into his arms. The embrace was firm and warm, his body a solid wall against the storm. Julian's struggles were useless against his strength. Ethan murmured for him to be still or he'd knock him out. Pressed against Ethan's chest, listening to the steady, strong beat of his heart, Julian, for the first time in years, slept through a storm. The next morning, Ethan was cold and distant. When Julian hesitantly brought up the night before, Ethan brushed it off, claiming he was merely worried Julian might die prematurely and void their $500,000 contract. Any warmth Julian had felt instantly turned to ice. It was always about the money. A month later, with the 3-month deadline looming, Ethan took him out of the house for the first time. They drove in a nondescript black SUV to a boardwalk amusement park, eerily quiet on a weekday afternoon. Ethan coolly pointed out the fatal possibilities of each ride. A loose safety harness on the roller coaster, a power failure at the top of the Ferris wheel. When Julian mentioned his claustrophobia, Ethan just looked at him, remarking that only people who were afraid of dying feared enclosed spaces. They rode the Ferris wheel. As their car reached the apex, overlooking the vast expanse of the city and the ocean, Ethan spoke. He pointed to a distant, drab building, identifying it as the orphanage where he grew up. He spoke of hunger, a gnawing emptiness that became a part of him. He was taken from there to a training camp abroad, a place he described as hell. He confessed that back then he had wanted to die too, just to make the hunger and the killing stop. Then one day he found half a hamburger in a trash can. It was cold and sandy, but he said he remembered the taste to this day. That half-eaten burger made him decide to live, on the off chance he might get to eat a better one someday. He looked at Julian, a flicker of something vulnerable in his eyes, and asked if it was pathetic that a life could be bought for half a hamburger. Julian, his heart aching for this man he barely knew, whispered that it wasn't pathetic at all. Then, with a courage he didn't know he possessed, he asked if Ethan would spare his life in exchange for a hamburger. Ethan stared at him for a long moment, then burst into laughter, a deep, genuine sound that shook his entire body. He wiped a tear from his eye and told Julian his life was worth more than a single burger. It would have to be a deluxe combo meal, at least, with an apple pie. The day the contract was set to expire, Julian's estranged stepbrother, Henry, broke into the house with a group of thugs. He found Julian in the living room, sneering about his persistence in staying alive and demanding to know where the family money had gone. He pressed a cold knife to Julian's cheek, explaining how easy it would be to kill him and stage it as a suicide. Just as Henry raised the blade, the front door splintered open. Ethan stood there, grocery bags in hand. His eyes took in the scene, and his face became a mask of cold fury. He set the bags down and told them to let Julian go. When the thugs advanced on him, Ethan moved. It was not a fight. It was a brutal, efficient dismantling. In minutes, all of them were on the floor, groaning in pain. Ethan stood over Henry, the captured knife glinting in his hand. He looked at Julian, his voice dangerously soft, and asked him how he wanted Henry to die. Looking at his cowering, pathetic brother, Julian felt only pity. He told Ethan to let him go, to let the police handle it. He didn't want his hands, or Ethan's, to be dirted by him. A slow smile spread across Ethan's face. After kicking Henry out with A to confess everything to the police, the house fell silent again. Overwhelmed, Julian threw his arms around Ethan, clinging to him. He buried his face in Ethan's shoulder and, with all the strength he had, sobbed that he didn't want to die anymore. He wanted to live with him. After a long moment, Ethan gently pushed him back. His expression was grave. He told Julian that breaking a contract was expensive. Then he drew his Glock from the small of his back and aimed it at Julian's chest. His voice turned cold, telling Julian that as an assassin, a contract was absolute. The true art, he explained, was in the timing. To take a life at the precise moment it most desperately wants to continue, that was the ultimate tragic beauty. His work had to be perfect. "Goodbye, Julian," he said. The gunshot was deafening. Julian flinched, waiting for the impact, the pain. Nothing came. He opened his eyes to see a small puff of smoke rising from the barrel of the gun, which was now pointed at the ceiling. A fine shower of plaster dust drifted down. Ethan lowered the weapon, a brilliant, breathtaking smile on his face. "Contract complete," he said, blowing on the muzzle. "The Julian who wanted to die is now dead. Congratulations on your rebirth." His legs gave out and Julian sank to the floor, gasping. Ethan knelt beside him, his smile softening. He pulled Julian into his arms as he began to cry, not from fear or despair, but from overwhelming relief. He stroked his back, murmuring that it was all right, and promised to make him sweet and sour fish to calm his nerves. Ethan never left. He declared that since the final payment was now void, Julian would have to pay for his 3 months of services in other ways. When Julian asked what he meant, Ethan suggested an impromptu trip to a state where they could get married. He claimed it was a practical matter, that having a spouse would simplify the paperwork for his official retirement. But then he leaned in and kissed him, admitting that he had miscalculated the job badly. He had meant to take a life and instead had lost his heart. Standing before a justice of the peace, Julian was so nervous he looked pale. The justice asked if he was there of his own free will. Ethan, without missing a beat, said he was just afraid of needles, as they had come straight from getting their blood work done. Later, with the certificate tucked safely in Ethan's pocket, they walked hand in hand to a supermarket. Ethan announced they were celebrating. He asked what Julian wanted for dinner. Julian looked at him, a slow smile spreading across his face, and said he wanted a hamburger. Ethan sighed dramatically but couldn't hide his own grin. As the sun set, their two shadows stretched out on the pavement before them, merging into one. He had hired a man to kill him, but instead that man had taught him how to live.